Liu Xiaoju's been selling imported products in Beijing for more than 20 years. But since the US and China slapped tariffs on each other's goods, business has been tough. She says a box of American breakfast cereal has doubled in price, forcing her to look for alternatives from Germany and Thailand.
The distributors of this particular American cereal brand were afraid that no one would buy it at such a high price under the tariffs, so they no longer supply to my store.
According to official data, shipments of US breakfast cereal to China dropped 45% in the first quarter of this year compared to 2018, while imports of pet food fell 35%.
A few months ago, the import agent told me the tariffs would push up price of all American pet food, and so they suggested I buy more goods in advance and store them.
In more encouraging signs, Beijing and Washington have announced a Phase 1 trade deal, including lower tariffs on Chinese goods in exchange for buying more US agriculture products. The two sides have also agreed to hold off on further duties, and China has taken more items out of the firing line. But while that's brought some relief for investors and US farmers, they say it's too early to celebrate. Many are waiting to see if Beijing will live up to its commitment.
If it is according to market demand, then it could be that there is somehow a cheaper place to buy the same agricultural products. The second is whether China has such big demand.
There are also fears the dispute could morph into a wider tech war between the world's two biggest economies with the emergence of 5G. And businesses are bracing for what could be another bumpy year. Many shop owners have been feeling the pinch over the past 18 months. This market used to be much busier, but now has fewer customers, which they say is partly due to more people shopping online and a slowing economy. China's economic growth cooled to 6% in the third quarter, its weakest pace in nearly 30 years as tariffs hit production. And analysts say the initial trade deal may not be enough to put the brakes on a further slowdown.
That is actually too small to have a big impact on the Chinese economy. So we expect that in the coming year, the Chinese economy still needs a big fiscal stimulus.
But with an economy already saddled with debt, just how big is the question? Samantha Vadas, TRT World, Beijing.
Let's get more on this now with Jeffrey Taco, who joins us from Savannah in Georgia. He's the editorial director at the American Institute for Economic Research. And in New York, we have Anne Lee, an economist and a professor at New York University. A very warm welcome to you both. Jeffrey, if I could start with you. Before we delve into the latest developments of this trade war, let's rewind and look back a little. It's been going on for 18 months now. A lot of people had thought that it would be done and dusted by now. But over the course of the year and a half, how has this dispute rattled markets, rattled the business community, rattled industry?
What's interesting is that Donald Trump somehow believed that things were going to be perfect. There would be no retaliation. Remember, his trade advisor, Navarro, said in the early days there will not be any retaliation. Everybody will immediately acquiesce. They'll buy more of our products. We'll get more revenue for ourselves, protect our jobs. Everything will be perfect. Nothing, not a single aspect of this trade war has worked out the way the Trump administration has predicted. Now, the humility has been a long time coming. I think we're starting to see just a little bit of it now, because for the very first time, you think about it, for the very first time in 18 months, we've got the Trump administration talking about rolling back existing tariffs. I don't think anything good is coming out of it. We've seen disrupted supply chains. American importers are paying a lot more for raw materials, and American consumers are paying a lot more. It's been a mess for everyone on both sides, and I hope that the Trump administration will learn some lessons.
And Lee, you've looked at the Chinese economy for many years now. In your view, what impact has this 18-month-long trade war had on top of that?
It certainly has hurt the economy somewhat, because as companies decided to relocate their supply chains to other countries in Southeast Asia, most notably, many Chinese workers were left without a job, and they had to be absorbed somehow many of them went into the service industry. And so it's certainly hurt many Chinese as well. The central government had, put various restrictions on loans to a lot of real estate developers to try to slow down property prices, and was basically trying to put a lid on the growing debt levels in China. And so that certainly caused growth to slow. The trade war certainly didn't help China's cause in any way, but it did solidify more nationalist sentiments in China because a lot of Chinese felt that the Americans were being very unfair to them, and by singling them out, and they were, very surprised, and they clearly have supported Xi in doubling down in trying to be more self-sufficient as a result. So maybe while they have short-term pain now, they might emerge stronger in the future.
Interesting. Jeffrey, Donald Trump said that the whole reason why he launched this trade war was to essentially level the playing field, that China wasn't playing by the rules that countries like the US and the rest of the world have to play along with. It's hard to deny that he's managed to get the Chinese leadership to negotiate, to review some of its trade practices, such as its laws surrounding foreign ownership, intellectual property. Do you think Donald Trump has been successful in that sense, to get the Chinese to at least think about reviewing the way they do business?
Well, my problem is with the methods. I mean, it's been brutal, and it's come at the expense of Chinese people. You know what's been horrible? Like when Donald Trump tweets a sense of triumph when he sees growth slow in China, as if he's winning. I mean, that's not a humane or even presidential or even American kind of spirit to want to make foreign people suffer. I didn't like that at all. And we've yet to really see any progress. And I'm not even sure what it means. This intellectual property issue is an extremely complicated problem. American pharmaceuticals want China to adopt American-style law concerning their own products. That will never happen. I'm not even sure that it should happen. There's a presumption here that somehow the U.S. has patents and trademarks and copyrights all figured out. I can promise you that is not true. In terms of the industrial subsidies and that sort of thing that Trump's always talking about, I mean, this is the pot calling the kettle black, as they say. The U.S. has tremendous agricultural subsidies. We might as well have like a Chinese-style central plan over agriculture here. That this has actually led to a kind of a rise of nationalism in China. Like, there's a great sense of resentment. I mean, look at iPhone sales. They've completely collapsed. And that's not because of any change in the law. It's because the Chinese consumers are suddenly think that it's unpatriotic to own an iPhone. Like, people don't want them anymore because they feel betrayed by the U.S. And that, to me, this is extremely heartbreaking. We went from a beautiful partnership to this titanic struggle. For what? I don't. It's still not clear what good comes out of any of this, really.
And Lee, can I get your view on this? We know that Beijing and Washington have agreed in principle to a so-called Phase 1 trade deal. We're told that they're going to be signing that in January sometime. The details will be revealed in due course. One of the provisions is that apparently China has agreed to up its purchases of US farm goods to the tune of $50 billion US. I'm sure there are a lot of other clauses in there. But as someone who's studied the Chinese economy, the Chinese leadership, do you believe China is serious about sticking to these measures, or are they simply waiting to see if Donald Trump will remain as president?
I think that they are serious in wanting to end the trade war. And so if they do sign the agreement, which will say that they will purchase these goods, I'm sure they'll do their best to. But I think that they're going to make sure that they're not set up to fail. I think that's the biggest risk in the agreement, is if there are expectations that are really too high and that China could be called by the U.S. for not sticking to it and reigniting another trade war, then it would be pointless to actually sign the agreement. So I think there's definitely risk to the current Phase 1 because if the language is such that China can't actually meet it, then I don't think they'll sign it.
No, okay, let's see what this new year will bring to this unfolding and ongoing trade dispute. Anne Lee in New York, Jeffrey Tucker in Savannah, Georgia. Thank you both so much again for your time.